Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Directions Mag Geospatial webinar. Thank you to the Geospatial community for being loyal to us for 25 years. Catch what you missed at directionsmag.com. We are excited to have Anne and Eli back with us. They are going to talk to us about some open source GIS and look at using the Coordinates Cloud platform. And so without any further ado, we want to give them all the time that we can. Over to you, Anne, to get us started.
Great. Well, thank you, Barbary and Lynette. Welcome to Coordinates. Today we will showcase how using Coordinates Cloud and working with QGIS, you can build a cost-effective geospatial platform. Coordinates Cloud will run alongside your current tools as we currently support open standard formats. Some of those tools can be really expensive to run with tokens and rolling enterprise limits, and some are free and open source. The most important thing is that people have the tools that they need to do their job. QGIS is a really powerful desktop GIS. It just needs that enterprise platform to connect all of the users with their teams, their clients, their colleagues, and that is where Coordinates Cloud comes in. Using Coordinates as your data management platform, you can free yourself up to use QGIS as an enterprise GIS or run multiple GIS tools, for example, if you're using Esri tools already. We enable you to connect and share your data with your colleagues, customers, and teams all through the one platform. Today, we're going to show you how to use the QGIS plugin to Coordinates, how that works, and give you a brief tour of the platform as well. So please fire those questions on through. If we can't answer them today, we will follow up with you. And on that note, I'll hand over Eli for this tour.
Cool. Thank you, Anne. I'm just going to kick off with a few slides to give you some context of what Coordinates is, how it hangs together. I'm going to go into coordinates.com briefly, show you the interface, get you an idea of how people go about discovering data, downloading data. And Anne's going to show you how to install the plugin, and then I'll show you how to use it. So let's get into some context. So in this slide, we're in the middle here, coordinates.com. Over on the left, we've got many GIS publishers. What they all have in common is they want to get their data onto the cloud and into the hands of their users. These green boxes on the left here signify that there's a number of different methods for getting your data into a full data management web app for configuring layers, working out access, configuring your users and groups. At the other end of the pipeline, we've got the GIS users. This could mean a number of different things these days. Could be GIS developers, could be architects, any stakeholder that you have in your project that needs to be able to see the data that you have. These end users have a number of different ways of getting data off the platform. Everything I do on the platform is API first, so it can be scripted using a scripting tool of your choice. That means that you can automate the uploading of data, automate the downloading of data, the configuration of the datasets that live in the cloud. And then down the bottom here, we've got this component called Kart. Kart is a wrapper around Git. I'll explain how that works briefly, but it's definitely relevant to the QGIS plugin. That is how end users can pull data off the platform. They could make edits and collaborate on data in the platform, and it gives you that one authoritative data set that lives up in the cloud. No longer have a need for Dropbox sending links around. Versioning is a problem, and I'll go into that shortly. This little bit here is crucial. Every layer that gets published has OGC web services hanging off it. It means that you can build consuming applications that talk to the data up on the cloud, and it just gives you that flow that a lot of people are needing these days. One of our missions is, we know that there's a bunch of GIS data sitting around in silos on file servers, on people's computers, and Dropbox, and what we want to help organizations achieve is getting the data all into one place that is internet visible and controlling access to it. We use a model of groups and users. So you publish a layer, you assign access to that layer, to groups, and then you as the data manager configures and controls who can see what. So once the data is up on Coordinates, there are a number of different methods of getting to the data. The focus of this particular conversation is you can take out your own coordinate site, load all your data up to it. It has your own branding, your own URL. It'll essentially look like an extension of your own organization, and your users can subscribe to that site and access the data that you've made available. We have built a desktop application which allows users to basically search the entire coordinates index from their desktop. There's no licensing associated with the app, and users essentially don't have to go to your site. They can grab data off your site using this desktop application. The QGIS plugin, which is the focus of this webinar, is a method for interacting with your site from your desktop. And so it creates an ecosystem whereby your users can have multiple methods of accessing the data up on your site. You control who can see what, and that's how the system essentially works. And then lastly, I'll just explain briefly how distributed version control works. Kart is built on top of Git. Git is a proven piece of technology in the web development world. We have extended Git so that it understands geospatial data. It means you can do things like clone a layer. So cloning essentially is another method for downloading data. The big difference is it's connected to the data that is up on your site. So that means that if you've cloned a layer down and the publisher makes updates or edits to that, you can do a simple pull, and that will pull just the deltas or incremental changes that have been pushed up to the site. Think of it as a subscription service, essentially. If you take it further and go into a collaborative environment, this means that you're giving your users the ability to edit data that sits in a repository up on your site. And they can use a number of different techniques to do that. I'd covered off the QGIS plugin. You can also use the app, and Kart, being a wrapper around Git, gives you command line abilities. So anything you can do in Git, you can do in Kart. The way that it works is user comes along, they clone a layer down, they end up getting the repository on their machine with the full version history. From there, they can make edits to their local repository and commit those, and then push them back up to the cloud. This allows an ARC user, for instance, to make their changes to the data, push it back up to your site. A QGIS user can then clone that layer down, make their edits, push them back up to the site. One of the simplest things it's for, as I mentioned earlier, is it allows this like hooked-in communication between the users and your data set. So they will get a notification that there has been an update. They can pull that update down and do with it what they will. The working copy we use for the repositories that get cloned down is a geo package. We've chosen a geo package because it's vendor agnostic, works with the ARC ecosystem. It also works with QGIS, and FME works with most systems. If you want to change the format of the working copy, you can change it to a RDBMS. So we support PostgreSQL, SQL Server, and MySQL. That's a brief rundown of what it is that we're going to show you today. So I'll jump into coordinates.com now, show you how it works. If you come to coordinates.com, this is your landing page. You can get information about pricing, features, product updates. If you want to jump into the cloud itself, hit the Browse Data button, and this takes you into coordinates.com. So coordinates.com is like an umbrella site. Any publishers that we have on the platform are visible from here. We've got data from all around the world up here. Some of you may or may not have already used it for pulling data. We've got a bunch of US data up there, which you can load into your map. If I go into Browse, and perhaps we'll go to America. This is a geo filter, so it's essentially saying only show me data from the area that you've chosen. When publishers load data into the site, we scan it, work out where it's from, apply a geotag. This allows you to filter down to it. A couple of things about data types. We support vector data, points, lines, and polygons. We also support raster data, be that raster or grid, And so there's where you can store all of your satellite imagery, multi-band data. We also support tables, which essentially is a layer that does not have a geometry associated with it. The publisher can group things together and publish them as a set, or these are the Kart repositories, and documents as PDFs. So you can use it essentially like an online SharePoint, push all your data up, load it into a group, and then users can come and they can search by groups. So I'll just grab a layer here. Let's go with New York, throw that into the map. I can from here do a number of different things. I can close down my data browser. We call this concept GIS Lite. The idea is a number of users do not have desktop software, are not GIS proficient, but do have a need to be able to query data and find out simple things about it. Every layer also has a spatial query API wrapped around it, so you could build an application that did point within polygons. You'll get returned any attribution with the layer. And then from the map viewer, you can also do things like show me the data table. This pulls up all of the attribution associated with it, and here you can do things like zoom to different features. It's possible to load a number of different layers into the map, and then from there you'll do your export. So from a site perspective, say for instance you wanted to, so what I'll show you now is how you might do the things that I'm going to show you in QGIS from the platform itself. So what I can do is I can load up my context. This takes me to my site. We've called it demo.coordinates.com. In here, I might be wanting to load a bunch of data. So the data sets I'm looking at here are only loaded to the demo site. If you wanted to make them available to the wider public, that can be done through the accessibility configuration. What we're doing today is I'm wanting to look at a bunch of data from a place called Rotorua, which is where I live. I'm going to load in some raster data. I'm going to load in a vector layer, and I'm also interested in some roading information. So once I've loaded that all into the site, I can close out of the data browser. I'm now in a map-only view, if you like. From here, I can jump into the export flow. Once I'm in the export flow, what I can do is set a crop. So say if I only want a little bit of the data, I can chop that. A couple of things that are worth pointing out here is under vector, we support Esri shapefiles, map info, CSV. That'll have a well-known text attribute containing the geometry. You can pick GeoPackage or Esri file geodatabase. And you can also grab your data out as a KML, DWG, or PDF. That's for vector data. For raster data, we support GeoJPEGs, which are going to be much smaller than a GeoTIFF. As I update the format that I want to pull it down at, we let the user know how big the data is they're about to export. And we also support JPEG 2000, ERDAS, KIA, and then PDF, KML, DWG. This is really the old method of pulling data off the site. Well, I say old, this is how it's been done for a number of years on Coordinates. You simply, I'll just make that a little bit smaller, I'll make that a GeoJPEG, so that pulls it down to an 87 megabyte download. When I create export, what's happening in the background is we're creating a file that the user can download, and you now have the data on your hard drive and off you go. So that is one method of interacting with the data. The other method is, which we're going to go into today, is the using the QGIS plugin to do everything from your desktop without even having to go to the site. We've tried to keep the UIs the same, so once a user understands how to use the site, they will inherently understand how to use the QGIS plugin. And we also have a desktop application that I'd mentioned earlier that has the same UI as well. There's a number of different methods of communicating with the data. The simplest way to think of it is you have a site that contains all your data, and then there's a number of different methods of interacting with it. Once this finishes, which should be relatively quickly, as I mentioned, I get a link and I can download the data. While that is cooking away, I think it would be worth switching to Anne now, and she can show you how you'd go about installing the QGIS plugin, and then I'll go through how you actually use it.
Excellent. Thanks, Eli. There we go. So how I am a user here, and you can see I'm on coordinates.com. I'm looking at some data, and I would like to sign up and consume the data. So at that point, you hit login and then go to sign up. And this is where you'd put in your email address and create a Coordinates ID. And once you have a Coordinates ID, that's when you can be invited to any private sites, and you'll have access to all the other data that's available, that's under Creative Commons license and freely available on coordinates.com, like Eli just showed you. So all this data here. I'm a QGIS user. So I'm going to show you how to install a plugin. I'm sure a lot of you already know how to do this, but here we go. So we jump into manage and install plugins, and then I've searched for coordinates, and you can find it here alongside Kart. And it's really important there's both of these because this architecture underpins this plugin. But I only need to install the one. When I hit install, you can see it then asks me to install Kart. And I'm going to say yes. And there we go, it's all installed. So I can then jump into plugins and show the Coordinates plugin in the data browser. And at this point, I'm going to log in again with my Coordinates ID. And immediately it pops up with Explore, and this shows me all the data that is freely available under all the publishers. And I can also jump into these sites that I've been invited to. So you can see my colleague has created Relaxed Duck Data Service, and Eli has created Coordinates Demo, and they've both invited me under my user interface. So this is completely private just to those people that they've invited. So at that point, I'm going to stop sharing and hand back to Eli to show you the full functionality.
Cool, thank you, Anne. Just before I jump into that, this download is now ready. So I want to hit the link that will download my layer. Suffice to say, I won't wait for that 51 seconds, but once I do get my download, it'll appear in my downloads directory, and I will have a geo package containing all of the data, and I'll have the raster layer ready to do my good work with. Next, I'll jump into the QGIS plugin. As Anne mentioned, I've got the plugin here. Any sites that you're a member of will appear under this context switcher. So say if your organization had multiple different sites, you can filter basically by site here. There's a few things that are worth pointing out here first. If I open this right up, I've got access to a filter, so I can do my filtering by type. Hadn't mentioned yet, but we also support point clouds, and we'll be releasing that into the wild shortly. These tiles here, or data cards, are the same look and feel as what we have up on the website. We give a bunch of information about the layers. So I guess the idea here is your users are looking for a data set on your site. This is where they can find out things about that layer. And there's basically two different methods of pulling data down. I can do one of two things. I can either say for a raster layer, I'm going to just say add. That adds my layer to my workspace. I can also add in any other information that I want, and you can also add layers from any of the other sites. So say if you've got a bunch of US data sitting up on the coordinate site, you can search for that, add it to your workspace, and do all of your things locally. This is a tile service, so there's no footprint on your local machine. It's simply querying the Coordinates Cloud, pulling the data down. Say if I wanted to add the boundary as well, your decision point here is, do I want to make any edits to the data, or do I simply need to view it as context? So for this boundary here, I don't intend to edit that. I'm going to just say add. That adds it to the workspace as well. And then for the roading network, I'm going to actually get a copy of that data. I might want to make edits to it. you can't make edits to data unless you actually have it locally. So you hit get to achieve that. The first step is I'm going to clone the layer down to a particular area. I'm going to create a folder and put it in there. And then there's another function in here, which is you can do a spatial filter. So the way a spatial filter is going to work is if I just make my canvas larger, and I'll zoom out a little bit. A lot of the layers are huge. You don't actually need the whole layer. You just need the area for what you're looking at. So you've got choices. You can either use no spatial filter, get the entire layer, or you can use a spatial filter. In this case, I would be using just my visible map extents, and I hit OK. So that starts the cloning process. That's going to pull the data down onto my machine. It's really quick because I've chopped just down to a certain area. I'm not bringing the whole data set. If once you've cloned it down, it will appear in one of two places. So there's my Coordinates plugin. With it, I've got my Kart plugin, and this shows me any layers that I've cloned down locally. I'll just jump into my file server, into my, and go into this Rotorua Roads. Here is the geo package. It's been chopped to my area, so it's only the tiny. If I was wanting to do collaboration, the fact that I only pulled a partial cut of the layer doesn't matter. I can, the Kart is smart enough to say, right here, edits, push them back up. So that's the data sitting on my local directory. If I go back into the QGIS plugin, the layer will also appear here, and the plugin also creates this coordinates folder. So these two are basically looking at the same stuff. You can choose where you want to put it. So this is going to be like a centralized index that's controlling where all the data has gone. I can drill down into the geo package and find the roads layer and add it to my workspace. And that adds those layers. So the big difference here, these are services. This is actually referencing that geo package that's sitting on my data set, on my hard drive. From here, I can cruise into the area. You can obviously do things like add any contextual data that you want. So in this case, I'll add OpenStreetMaps, drag it to the bottom. And so from here, I can switch things on and off. What I've essentially achieved is I've got all my working data sitting in a workspace in QGIS. I can go ahead now and do things like, I'm going to turn this off just to remove the noise. I might make it slightly larger so we can see it better. So say, for instance, what I wanted to do was add in a driveway. There's no road frontage for this site. So I can put this layer into edit mode. So I'm now editing the roads layer. I'm going to put a proposed road in here very roughly. And let's just say the parking is going to go right here. So that's going to give me the ability to communicate these changes with the roading guys. They know that this is exactly where I want to do it. You obviously would have snapped to the road and done maybe a much more considered editing than that. From here, I can say save, and that has saved that to my working copy. What I want to do is make that a part of my actual repository. So I can come into this repo and I can say, I want to commit any working copy changes for this data set. And that's going to allow me to enter a commit message. Any edits that I do will have a commit message for auditability. One of the big uses of Kart is you can go back through any changes that I've made. You can roll back to a previous change. Essentially anything you can do in Git, you can do in Kart, but operating on geospatial data. So now that I've saved that, I can go into the repository and I can say, show me the log. That's going to show me all of the edits that have happened over the history of this repository. And from here, there's a bunch of options. I can show the changes that were introduced by this commit. Over time, this history will build up with a number of different edits that happen from a number of different editors. Any of your users that have access to this layer can come in here and do their edits, and at any time you can go back and inspect the layer and work out exactly what was added. You can add in your rationale, why did you do that? And you can do things like roll back to a point, you can create new branches, you can switch between branches, you can then do a conflict resolution flow when you merge a branch back into your main branch. So these are all Git concepts that have been extended by the usage of Kart. I won't go into it today, but you could also then push this. So it gives you the ability to push and pull data from your local environment back up to the cloud. Once it's up on the cloud, your user, your data administrator can jump into manage, they can inspect the repository, and they could merge it into main and then publish a new layer off that. So there's quite a lot of flexibility in how you would go about interacting with the system using the Kart plugin. One thing I thought I'd just briefly mention in the last 3 minutes was if you were an Esri user, not a QGIS user, you can make use of this plugin, this desktop app, which is downloadable from our site. So from here, it's got all the same sort of functionality I've just been going through. I can look at a data set here, so I can open it up and go, oh, yep, that's the layer I want. I can do a get. I can remove the spatial filter and I can say get. That's doing exactly the same thing we did in the QGIS plugin. It'll pull down this layer to my directory. Once I have it in my directory, I could then fire off ArcPro, make a bunch of edits to it. They will show up in this data card over here. And then from there, from using this application, you can push and pull data back up to the cloud. So mindful of the fact that we're about to hit the 30-minute mark, I think I'll just park that there and pass it back to maybe Anne. Would you like to make some closing comments?
Yeah, thank you, Eli. So today we've shown you how to, we're using Koordinates as a cloud site of your own. You can deliver data directly to all your QGIS users with your own branding using the plugin. There are many other ways, as you can see, to service other software, but today's focus really was on the plugin and how Koordinates Cloud can be used for that platform. So I wanted to thank you all today for joining us. You can go ahead and download the plugin right now if you want and start consuming some of that open data that we showed you. But if you are interested in a discussion of your own needs, please do get in touch with us and we can talk about how it might work for you. So yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic day out there. And thank you so much to the team at Directions and Barbara and Lynette for your time today. We really appreciate the work that you do.
Oh, thanks so much. We love having you here. Thanks again to Anne and Eli for sharing their expertise, and we hope to see you at another Geospatial webinar. Tell a friend about Coordinates and Directions Magazine. Thanks, everybody.